My family set up an accident to steal my inheritance, leaving me for dead on a forgotten mountain road. They really thought they'd pulled it off. They stole my future, my identity, and cried crocodile tears at a funeral for an empty coffin. They built an empire on my ashes, turning themselves into public saints while being absolute monsters behind closed doors. But they made one colossal mistake. I survived. With the help of a disgraced journalist who had nothing to lose, I decided I didn't just want justice. I wanted to burn their perfect reputation to the ground, and I made sure to stream it live for the entire world to see. Before we start, if you believe that justice should always win, no matter how powerful the villain, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell. You really won't want to miss the stories we have coming up. To everyone else, the Vance family was a dynasty, the kind built on old money and a flawless public image. My father, Richard Vance, was an industry titan. His handshake sealed million-dollar deals and his smile charmed politicians. My mother, Alina, was the perfect society wife, her name on the board of every important charity in the city. And my brother, Daniel, he was the golden heir, handsome, ruthless, and a younger, sharper copy of our father, already being groomed to take over. We lived on a sprawling estate that felt more like a museum than a home. That family portrait in the grand entryway was a masterpiece of deception. It showed 4 smiling, happy people. It was the biggest lie we ever told. And then there was me, Amelia, the glitch in the family portrait. I just wasn't like them. I didn't care about the galas or the boardroom drama. I loved books more than balance sheets. My father called it a lack of ambition. My mother called it a phase. Daniel just called me a disappointment, usually with a smirk that never reached his cold, calculating eyes. But the real reason they resented me, the thing that truly marked me as an outsider, was my inheritance. My grandmother on my mother's side saw the coldness in her own daughter and the greed in her son-in-law. So she left the bulk of her fortune to me. It wasn't just money, it was freedom. A huge trust fund I'd get control of on my 25th birthday. To my family, this was unforgivable. It was their money, their legacy, and it had been given to the one person who didn't worship the Vance name. For years, they'd make passive-aggressive comments, offering to manage it for me, to fold it into the family empire where it belonged. I always said no, and with every refusal, the house got a little bit colder. As my 25th birthday got closer, something changed. The coldness was replaced by this weird, fake warmth. My mother suddenly wanted to have lunch. My father started clapping me on the back, talking about how proud he was of me. Daniel even stopped smirking and started smiling, though his eyes were still just as empty. They said they wanted to heal the rift, to finally be a real family. To celebrate, they proposed a special trip, a weekend at our remote cabin, deep in the mountains. Just the 4 of us. A family celebration, my mother had said, her smile looking like it could shatter. A fool would have been suspicious. I was just a daughter who desperately wanted to believe her family could love her. So I ignored the alarm bells going off in my head. I didn't think twice when my father spent a whole afternoon tinkering with my car, a car he'd never cared about before. I dismissed it as a rare, fatherly gesture. I didn't question why my mother kept watching me, her stare feeling less like affection and more like an appraisal. I packed my bags, my heart filled with a fragile hope that this was a new beginning. It was, just not the one I was expecting. We drove up on a Friday evening. 2 cars. I was in mine with my mother in the passenger seat, her silence filling up the car. My father and Daniel followed in their Range Rover. The sun went down, and the winding mountain roads got dark and dangerous, with a steep drop on one side and a rock wall on the other. My mother was droning on about the guest list for some charity gala when it happened. I saw a sharp curve coming up and pressed my foot on the brake. Nothing. My heart jumped into my throat. I slammed the pedal to the floor. It was completely limp, useless. A cold dread washed over me. The car wasn't slowing down, it was speeding up, hurtling toward the turn. "The brakes are out," I managed to say, my voice a strangled whisper. My mother didn't gasp. She didn't panic. She just turned her head and looked at me, her expression calm, almost serene. In that split second, I knew. This wasn't an accident. This was an execution. I yanked the emergency brake. The car shrieked and skidded sideways. For a second, I thought it might work, but we were going too fast. The car hit the guardrail, which groaned, bent, and then snapped. Time warped. I remember the stomach-lurching feeling of being weightless as we went over the edge, the treetops rushing up to meet us, the violent, bone-shattering impacts as the car tumbled down the ravine. My last conscious thought was of the headlights of my father's Range Rover. They paused on the road high above us, hanging in the dark like a silent witness. Then, they turned and drove away, leaving me for dead. Pain, that was the first thing I felt, a searing agony that came from everywhere all at once. The world was a blurry darkness, and my mouth was thick with the coppery taste of blood. I was hanging upside down, held by my seatbelt in the mangled wreck of my car. My mother was silent. A single glance confirmed she hadn't survived, a grim mercy I wasn't given. Survival is a primal instinct. It doesn't involve thought, it's just pure will. I don't know how long it took, but I unbuckled myself and fell onto the car's crushed roof. Every movement was fire. My leg was broken, bent at an angle it shouldn't be, and my face felt like a raw mess. But I was alive. And with that single fact came a burning clarity. They left me here to die. Crawling out of that wreck was torture. I dragged myself through the shattered window, glass tearing at my skin. For hours, I pulled my broken body up that steep, dark ravine. The image of my father's headlights driving away played on a loop in my brain, fueling me past the pain. When I finally hit the asphalt, I collapsed and prayed someone would find me. A trucker found me at dawn. I probably looked like a ghost. I woke up in a hospital in some town I'd never heard of, my face covered in bandages. When the police asked for my name, instinct took over. I gave them a fake one. I knew I couldn't trust anyone from my old life. Weeks turned into a blur of surgeries and agonizing physical therapy. I used a hospital library computer to look myself up. And there it was, my own obituary. Amelia Vance, beloved daughter, dead at 24 in a tragic accident. There were photos of the funeral. My father with a perfect mask of grief. My brother standing stoically beside him. They even eulogized me. The article went on to say that, in the wake of this unspeakable tragedy, the family was honoring my memory. My inheritance, which they now controlled, would be folded into the new Vance Family Foundation, a charity to help those in need. They stole my life, my name, and my money, and had the nerve to paint themselves as saints. The world saw grieving philanthropists. I saw murderers. When I left the hospital, I had a scarred face, a permanent limp, and no money. I was officially a ghost. I lived in shelters, took cash jobs, and my anger hardened into pure resolve. The police were useless. The Vances were untouchable. Their lawyers would have buried me. No, justice wasn't going to be found in a courtroom. My revenge had to be as public and devastating as their betrayal was private and vile. For that, I needed an ally, someone who hated them as much as I did. My search led me to Julian Croft. Years ago, Julian was a star investigative journalist. He'd made the mistake of digging into one of my father's dirty business deals. Richard Vance didn't just kill the story, he systematically destroyed Julian's career, branding him a fraud. Julian lost everything. I found him running a conspiracy blog out of a cluttered apartment above a laundromat. He looked older, haunted, and cynical, a man with absolutely nothing left to lose. He was perfect. When I showed up at his door, he almost slammed it in my face. He'd heard crazy stories before, but I had something the others didn't, proof. I showed him my hospital records, the scars on my face, and told him things only a true Vance would know. I told him about the look in my mother's eyes before the crash. I saw a flicker of the old journalist in him. He wasn't a believer, not yet, but he was interested. He agreed to do some digging, mostly just to prove me wrong. But as the days turned into weeks, his skepticism melted away and was replaced by a familiar fury. We became a two-person army, fueled by coffee and rage. Our first break came from the family charity. Using his old skills, Julian hacked into the Vance Foundation's records. It wasn't a charity, it was a slush fund. A scam to launder money and evade taxes. Donations were being funneled into offshore accounts, paying for Daniel's sports cars and my father's secret art collection. We downloaded everything. Next, we went after the car. Julian found the mechanic who signed off on the report blaming mechanical failure. The guy had gambling debts and a sudden pile of cash that appeared right after I died. Julian, using a burner phone and a voice modulator, posed as a blackmailer. The terrified mechanic confessed everything in a panicked phone call, admitting Richard Vance paid him off to make it look like an accident. We recorded every single word. The final piece was personal. We dug into their private lives, uncovering all the hypocrisy. We found proof of my father's affairs, Daniel's brutal treatment of his girlfriends, the whole web of lies they lived in. We had a mountain of evidence, enough to send them to prison for life, but I knew it wasn't enough. A quiet trial their lawyers would drag out for years, that wasn't justice. They gave me a public death. My revenge had to be a public execution. It had to be a spectacle. Our target was clear, the annual Vance Family Foundation Charity Gala. Their biggest night of the year. It was the perfect stage, and we were about to burn it to the ground. The night of the gala was a spectacle of wealth and self-praise. The grand ballroom was dripping with crystals and overflowing with the city's elite. At the center of it all was my family. My father, Richard, radiating power. My grieving mother, Elena, looking tragically beautiful. And my brother, Daniel, the charming son, accepting condolences with practiced humility. They were putting on the performance of a lifetime. I was there too, hidden in plain sight. A heavy wig, prosthetic makeup, and a catering uniform made me invisible. Julian was my eye in the sky, in a van down the street, his fingers on a keyboard wired into the hotel's entire AV system. We had an inside man, a disgruntled AV tech Daniel had publicly humiliated and fired months before. He was more than happy to help us crash the party. The evening went just as we thought it would. Speeches, toasts, and a slick video on the giant screens showing the good work of the foundation, all paid for with my money. Then, the main event, Richard Vance himself, stepping up to the podium to accept the Philanthropist of the Year award. He smiled. "My friends," he began, "in a year marked by such personal tragedy, your support has been a beacon of light." He talked about legacy, community, turning grief into action. He even had the nerve to say my name. My daughter, Amelia, was a firefly, a bright light extinguished far too soon. We can only hope the work we do in her name shines half as brightly. That was our cue. "Showtime," Julian's voice crackled in my earpiece. On the screens behind my father, the video of smiling children vanished. It was replaced by a black screen with white text, the truth about the Vance family. A confused murmur went through the crowd. My father's smile tightened. "Apologies, ladies and gentlemen, a slight technical glitch." But then the main speakers clicked on, and it wasn't his voice that filled the hall. It was mine. "Good evening," my pre-recorded voice echoed, cold and clear. "My father is right. My name is Amelia Vance, and I was a light he tried to extinguish." Panic flashed in my father's eyes. Daniel and Elena shot to their feet, their faces masks of horror. They yelled at the AV booth, but the door was locked. At that exact moment, Julian hit another key. The magnetic locks on every exit slammed shut with a heavy thud. No one was leaving. They were a captive audience. "You all know me as the tragically deceased daughter," my voice continued, as my birth certificate appeared next to the fake death certificate. "The truth is, my family didn't mourn my death. They engineered it." For the next 10 minutes, we exposed everything. The screens showed their secret bank statements, tracing charity donations to their offshore accounts, highlighting every purchase, Daniel's Ferrari, my father's love nest, my mother's diamond necklace. Then came the audio. The room went dead silent as the mechanic's terrified voice filled the ballroom, confessing to sabotaging my brakes. "He paid me cash, Richard Vance," he said to make it look like an accident. Next, we showed them me. Pictures of my broken body in the hospital, the medical records. The crowd gasped. People were pointing, their faces turning from shock to disgust. Finally, the presentation ended, and a live feed filled the screens. It was me, standing at the back of the room, pulling off my wig. I stepped out of the shadows, my scarred face lit by the stage lights, my limp obvious. I looked right at my family. Their faces had crumbled into pure terror. "You left me to die on a mountain," I said, my voice raw and real, amplified by the mic I held. "You buried an empty coffin and stole my name. You thought you were untouchable." I let the words hang in the air. "You were wrong." On cue, the ballroom doors burst open. It wasn't security. It was the police, armed with warrants. They walked onto the stage, and the click of handcuffs was deafening in the silence. They cuffed my father, my brother, and my mother, reading them their rights in front of everyone they had ever tried to impress. The last thing I saw was Alina's face, her perfect mask gone, staring at me with pure hatred. She didn't see her daughter. She saw the person who ruined her. The aftermath was a firestorm. The Vance family gala massacre, as the tabloids called it, was the biggest scandal the city had ever seen. Their reputation was vaporized. Their powerful friends vanished overnight. The trial was just a formality. Our evidence was ironclad. They were convicted on all counts and sentenced to decades in prison. I took back my name and my inheritance. The first thing I did was shut down the Vance Foundation and redirect every corrupt dollar to legitimate charities for victims of violent crime. I started a new foundation, a real one, in my grandmother's name, the one person who ever really saw me. There was no joy in it. Seeing my family in handcuffs didn't heal my scars or erase the memory of that fall. Revenge didn't fix me, but it did bring peace. It was the end of a war I never wanted, and it was justice. They tried to erase me and turn my life into a footnote in their story. But they forgot that you can't just steal a person's life. In their hunger for power, they lost sight of the only thing that has any real value: the truth. I survived, and by surviving, I was finally free to build my own life, far away from the shadow of the Vance name. If this story resonated with you, and you want more tales of revenge and justice, make sure you've liked this video and subscribed. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done? Thanks for listening.